welcome back everybody. Today I'm going to do a walkthrough of the Lab 2 of the 08242D Computer Graphics module, and I'm assuming that you've already done Lab 1, and this is going to be a requirement really because there are a bunch of setup things in Lab 1 that you're going to be reusing, so make sure you've done that, and that's what I'm going to be doing, building on my Lab 1 exercise. So you can see on the screen at the moment the result of the Lab 1, and I'm going to copy and paste the index file from my Lab 1 folder into my Lab 2 folder to overwrite what's already there, and I'm going to commit that. See, Lab 2 task 1 added Lab 1 index file. And I'm going to do the same with the JavaScript folder as well, because that's being reused. Place that, commit those. One from Lab 1. And what that does is it gives us a nice basis to start our new project. Need to make sure that I add the vector file, which apparently I forgot to. You may have as well, so I'll just commit that too. Added our vector. Okay, so as I said, this lab is going to be building on our previous lab. Probably won't need the HTML file this time, but let's just include it anyway. So Lab 1, we don't need one. Lab 1, don't need those. So Lab 2 one, so let me open up the JavaScript files as well in Notepad++ so we can work on it. Okay, so that saved us a bunch of effort. Right, going into our canvas file, we're not going to want to draw the same thing anymore, so we're going to get rid of that so we can have some new draw things going on. I'm just going to update that on SVN as well, so commit that change. Nice. Oops. Blank draw function to having typing problems as usual, to fill for this lab. Right, here we go. Okay, so what we're going to want to do is draw a house. So this is our first task. So using what we were doing last time, I'm going to make use of the begin path, move to line 2, close path, fill style, fill and stroke, all of which were covered in the lecture, and we're going to use those to build our house. So let's start, I guess, with well, if we just confirm that I have actually got the Lab 1 index open at the moment, so let's just change that. House drawing lab tutorial, and I will make sure that I load the right one into Chrome so we can actually see what we're doing. So we've got a nice blank canvas there. Let's just go ahead and commit that change. Updated the text in the HTML file. Okay, so back to our canvas then. So we're going to start to build up a house. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to want to use some nice move tos and line tos. So where should we start then? Move to, say, 100, 100, just as a starting point. Okay, so line 2. Let's think. Okay, how about 300, 100. At the end we're going to want to stroke it, so I'll just put that in now so we can always make sure that we can see what our house is doing. Okay, so there we've got our line. That's a good starting place, I think. Okay, so let's continue to draw more of an outline of our house. So we've got our line 2, 300 there, so let's go down to 200. Let's come back. And finally we can go back to where we started. That should give us a nice rectangle. Or of course with that last one we could always do a closed path as well to get the same effect. Okay, so that is the wall of our house. So next let's do a door. So let's think, where would that be? Let's start it at 150 and at let's think 175 maybe, and then go to, let's go across the top of the door to 225, and then down to the base of the house, that's fine, but 225, then across to 175, and that should be a door. Okay, I want my door to be a bit taller, I think, so let's go with 170. I know it had to be the other way, wouldn't it? So actually 130. Make the door a bit taller and perhaps a bit narrower as well. So let's say 180 to 220. Yeah, that looks kind of like a door. Okay, we're happy with that. Shall we make it so that it fills as well, perhaps? So for that, let's add a fill style equals, let's make it red. So we have it in red. You remember the hex representation for the colors, with the two first ones being how much red we're using, how much green we're using, and how much blue we're using. So if we're all red, then that's going to give us our red color. So let's see. Oh, that's filled in everything in red. Why is that? Now this is where we remember our begin paths. So you want to have a nice begin path at the beginning of every sort of new path, new thing that you're drawing. So we do this. Okay, so a nice red door for our white walled house. Okay, what I find useful as well is that now there's obviously quite a lot of code there, so let's just comment that. so we know what each bit is doing. Okay, what should we do next? Should we do a window perhaps? So actually I think a window is more like a door than it is like a wall, because we're going to want to colour it in. So draw window, just copied and pasted the door one, try and save myself a little bit of typing there. I want my window to be blue. And so where's that going to be? So relative to the door, we're going to want it to be, I'm going to do my left window first. So that means subtracting, what's that, subtracting about 50 from the X value, I guess. Let's see if we do that. So, I know, a bit more than 50, I guess. Well, we'll try it anyway. 30 to 170. Whoops. 170, 130. We don't need to come all the way down to the bottom, so if we do it to, let's say, 220 maybe? What does that look like? Oh, no, needs to go the other way, didn't I? Okay, so let's just undo those and go back a bit instead to 170. Whoops. Typos abound. There we go, that's a window. I think I want it a bit further over though, so we'll do to 120 to 160, 160, 20. There, that's a better positioning for the window, I think. And I also add in a nice little cross as well in our window. So halfway between that would be 140, and then if we go from 130 to 170, and then we'll also, so halfway between 130 and 170 will be 150, and we want to go from 120 to 160. So hopefully, there we go, a nice little cross there in the window, rustic old window frame. Okay, so that's drawn our left window. Amend my comment accordingly. I'm going to reuse all of that. So let's say we are going to draw our window on the right there. So what was the right of the door? It's going to be 220 plus about 20, so let's say it's from 240 then. 240 to 280, I guess. So all we need to do is adjust the X values, because all the Y ones are going to be the same. See how that worked out. There we go, brilliant. Okay, so 2 windows now. This is our right window. And then finally we are going to want to draw a roof. So I'm going to borrow the draw door. Draw the roof. The roof I want to be red, that's fine. Okay, so let's think. Back in our wall, that goes from 100 to 100 in one corner. So 100, 100. Then we're going to want to go all the way across to 300, 100. And then finally, We don't need quite as many lines because we're going to make a triangle. We want to go into the middle, so that's going to be at 200, and the Y there is going to be at, I don't know, should we say 50 for now? See what that looks like. Okay, that's not bad. I think I want a taller roof though. Yeah, that's more like it. There we go. So I've got a house now. Looks vaguely like what I did before in the instructions. Oh, one thing I do want to change actually is I want to make my lines a bit thicker so that they stand out a bit more. So let's just change the line width. There we go. There's a bit of a thicker lined house. Okay, so I've drawn my house now, so I'm going to commit all of that to SVN. Tab 2, task 3, draw a house. Okay, so that's all committed. What's next? Okay, so the next task is that we want to make lots of houses appear on the screen. Obviously I've got one at the moment, but the issue with doing that, using the code that we have at the moment, is that in order to draw lots of houses in different places, you see I've already hard coded all of these values. So that's going to be a real problem for us if we actually want to draw lots of them. Because to do that I'd had to work out where every house is going to be, and it's going to be quite infuriating. So we don't want to do that. Obviously a load of effort, lots of opportunities for mistakes in there. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to make a new function. Whoops. Okay, so call it draw house, and I want draw house to take in a position that we can use. Okay, so let's take all of our drawing code out of there, out of the draw function, and add it into our draw house function. And then when we're in our draw function, we can call draw house and give it a position. Typo that, and a typo at the end. Okay, so I think what we're going to want to do is we'll use that text position here, but we're going to rename that because it's obviously not a text position anymore, it's a house position. So let's update this. House position, house position. Okay, so we've pasted all our house drawing code into our draw house function, and we're going to want to change all of these absolute positions, these hard-coded values, into relative positions, as in positions that are relative to the position vector that we're giving into our draw house. So at the moment all of these are essentially drawn relative to the origin, so you can imagine that these are 0 plus 100, 0 plus 100, 0 plus 300, and what we want to do is make it so that it's position plus the value. For example, so we're taking our p position, can't type again, p position get x value, and similarly we'll need the get y value, just copy and pasting there to try and save myself some effort. So if I just scroll that over a bit so we can see everything. So you notice instead of essentially 0 plus 100, we've got p_position.getX plus 100, p_position.getY plus 100. So that's effectively, when we draw that line, it's going to draw it relative to our p_position. So we can go through and do that with all of our positions. So we'll start with all of the X ones to begin with. Keep going. Save that, and then we'll also get the Y version as well, and add that to our Y component. Almost there. And what this will do is it'll position our house relative to that p-position. So if you remember, we set it up here, house position equals new vector 100, 100. So if I just set that to now to the origin, the house should remain drawn in the same place that we had it before, because if before we were drawing it relative to the origin, and now we're still doing that. But now if I change this, so let's say we want to move it down the screen by adding Y to it, and I refresh that, and our house moves. So you can see how the house is drawn relative to that position. Okay, so one disadvantage that we have at the moment is that if I turn that back to the origin again, you'll notice that although I'm drawing my house relative to this position, it's actually drawing it sort of, quite a way in, because we're using our house position plus everything, plus 100, plus 300. So the house is always drawing down from the top left of the position I give it. This is a problem in regards to that when you are actually trying to position your house, it becomes quite difficult to work out where that house is going to be, because it's displaced by this arbitrary value. So what we're going to do is we're going to adjust all of these values so that it is more nicely positioned. So possibly the best way to do that is to work out, well, where is the center of this house at the moment? It's probably in the middle there, halfway from left to right in the wall and on the line between the roof and the house because of the places that we've put it. So that's going to be halfway between 100x and 300x, and I think it's going to be at 100y as well. So that would be 200x and 100y. So what I'm doing here is I'm just setting the house position vector to be where the center of the house is, and then as we start to adjust these x and y offsets inside the functions, we'll be able to move our house so that it's all around that point. So if I just do that for now, okay, for the moment it's displaced it because we haven't changed anything, but let's start to do that. So if the center of the house is 0, just for the moment assume that the center of the house is 0, 0, even though we've displaced it for the moment, then we know that the x for the wall goes from 100 to 300, so there's a range of 200 between that. So if we want to bring that down to 0, what we can do is we can subtract 200 from all of these x positions. So 200 minus 100 is minus 100. 300 minus 200 is 100, and so on. So we're just going to go through and adjust all of these. So 180 minus 200 is minus 20, plus 20, plus 20, minus 20. and keep going. So this is going to be minus 80. Oops. Minus 40. Minus 40. Minus 80. It's going to be minus 60. Minus 60. Minus 80. Minus 40. So let's have a look at what that's done so far. Okay, so far we've adjusted all the positions for the wall and the door and the left window. So let's keep going. Okay, so for the right window next, so take 200 off that, gives us 40, 80, 80, 40, 60, 60, 40, 80, and so that's going to be our minus 100, our 100, and 0. Obviously if we're just adding 0 we can delete that. So that's adjusted all the x values. Now we need to do the y values next. So if we go back up to our wall, so our wall goes from 100 to 200, which is a range of 100, but then we've also got the roof on top, which if we look down here is from 0 to 100, so that's obviously another 100, so the range again is 200. So we can delete 200 from everything. So starting from the top, minus 100, this drops down to 0, so we can just get rid of it. And so this is going to become minus 70, minus 70 again, that's going to drop down to 0. So that's the wall and the door. Let's just see those move. Yeah, so they've moved. And then let's continue. Minus 70, minus 70, minus 30, whoops, minus 30, minus 70, trying to keep it all nice and tidy, making a bit of a mess, minus 50, minus 50. Remember, I'm just subtracting the 200 from it each time. The values that you use are going to affect how much you have to take off. Minus 30. Almost at the end now. Minus 70. Minus 30. Minus 50. Minus 50. Minus 100. Minus 100. And minus 200. Okay, so let's put our windows off, and our roof is off the screen at the moment, but let's just move it down. Whoops. There we go. Our house is now complete, and our center of our house is in the middle of the house and the roof. And if I just put it back at 0, 0, you'll notice that the top left corner will be... I have made a mistake. Apparently our top left corner is in the bottom of the middle of the house. I should have only subtracted 100 from it, it appears. or at least from the y value. I think it's the y value that I've made a mistake with. So let me just go and correct those as quickly as I can. So we need an extra 100 on everything. So that's going to be 0. It's going to be 0. It's going to be add 100. Okay, so plus 30. Plus 30. Plus 100. Plus 100. Okay, plus 30. Plus 30. Going to be plus 70. Plus 70. Plus 30. Plus 70. It's going to be plus 50. Plus 30. Plus 70. Almost at the end. Plus 30. Plus 70. Plus 50. That's going to become 0. And that is going to be minus 100. Okay, so let's refresh that. There we go. So now the top left is in the center of the house. And if I start moving that around, 200, 200, that should put our house on the screen. There we go. Okay, right, now that's right. I'm going to commit that. Okay, change the position of the house line 2s to be relative to P position, and P position is the center of the house. Okay, so that's a good save point. Alright, let's go back to our code. What's next? So, what we want to do is put our house, draw our house quite a few times. Okay, so what we're going to do there is use a for loop. So for I equals 0, I is less than, I don't know, let's say we want to do 3 houses. And then I equals I plus 1. So in order to make our house draw there, we're going to want to have a vector. We'll just come back to what's actually going to go in there, but we're going to want to use our house position here. We don't need to pass in a P position into our drawer anymore because we're going to work out what that position is. So we can get rid of this house position because we don't want it confusing matters. So deleting those. Okay, so this time, in order to build up where we want our house vector, so let's say we want to move it across whenever we're drawing a house. So var x position, let's say, equals I times however much we want to move it across for. So we probably want to move it across as wide as our house is, which in this case is 200. And then we also want a Y position as well. So what do we want our Y position to be? Well, we can start with 0, I guess. So now we're creating a new vector, whoops, every time we go around the loop. You can see we're drawing our houses. Now because it's drawing from the center of the house and that's our top left, we are going to want to go in and give an offset so that it draws down from the top. So the Y position, for example, we want to add an offset of 100. X position, we want to add an offset of 100 again. So now when we draw our houses, they're all drawing on screen and in a nice row like that. So say we wanted to have multiple rows of houses like in the picture in the instructions. What we can do there is have ourselves a nested for loop. So we just borrow this one for the moment. Use a different index value. Okay, so if we do j times the height of our house again, plus the offset value, we've now got an outer loop which is affecting the rows, and the inner loop which is affecting the columns. So we do that again. There we have it. 9 houses, all drawn at the correct position that we're giving it. So let's commit that. Drawing the houses in a for loop using the draw house function. Okay, so what's next in our tasks? Okay, in this task we want to make every other door in our set of houses, we want to make it a different color. So if we want to do that, we're going to add a pDoor color parameter to our draw house. So in addition to the position, we add a door color, and so when we go down here and draw our door, where was that code? Here it is. So at the moment we're just using a hard-coded value, fixed value of red there. So instead let's use our door color parameter that we've just added. So if I come back down here into our draw function, let's have a variable for our door color. So let's add the red one back in just for the moment. Then we can use door color in our draw house, and that, yep, so that still has the door color showing us the red one that we want. So now we want to vary it. So what we can do there, which is quite interesting, would be to, let's say, have a count variable, and the count variable we're going to increase every time we've drawn a house. So this count variable is going up and up and up. So what we can do then is, before we draw our house, we can say if the count value has a modulus of 2, so essentially the modulus operator is saying if I divide count by 2 here, the modulus operator gives us the remainder value of doing that division. So if that is 0, then we know that our count value is an even value. So we can set something based on the set the door color for it being even. So let's say if it's even, we want it to be we want it to be red, and if it's odd, then we want it to be a different color. So I'll leave you to figure out what orange is, unless this lucky guess works. Okay, so that gives us our yellow value. You'll notice that every other door in this has turned a different color, so it's turned yellow. And that's because of that code there. So now that that works, I'm going to commit that so that it's nice and safely stored. I think I just accidentally put on the caps lock. Added alternating door colors in the for loop using a modulus. Okay, so what's next? Yes, we're going to look at refactoring our draw house function, because as you notice there's between 29 and there's somewhere in the region of 60 lines of code just in our draw house function, and it all gets a bit cluttered. I mean, we've tried to make it a little better by using these comments so we at least know what each section of code does, but what we're going to do is we're going to tidy it up instead and make it much neater. So let's add some new functions. I'm going to take my draw house function and we'll start with draw wall. Draw wall doesn't need a door color, so we'll get rid of that. Just close the function, and then we can cut that paste out of there. Cut that code, paste it into our draw wall function, and then in place of that we can just call it draw wall p position. And if we do that and just refresh our page, you'll notice that nothing's changed because it's still doing the same thing. Okay, I'm going to repeat that process, but with all the other ones as well. So I'll just borrow that, call it draw door. Draw door does need the draw color there. Just cut that, paste it in there, and call draw door p position p door color. So tidy that up a bit, and so on. You note that I can notice that I'm getting rid of the comments in each case because the name of the function is a nice sensible naming convention, so you can see exactly what it does and you don't need to include a comment as well. That's just would be excessive commenting. So let's grab this, draw left window, draw right window, and finally I'm going to draw the roof. We refresh. There we go. Okay, so everything is as it was, except now you can see that our draw house has nice simple 5-6 lines of code in there, and each line of code says exactly what it does. So to draw a house, we have to draw a wall, we'll draw a door, we'll draw a left window, draw a right window, and draw a roof. If we want the details of how each of those is done, then we can go to the appropriate function where we now only have to look at 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 lines of code instead of the search for it in the 50 lines of code, the 60 lines of code that we had before. That's much better. So I'm going to commit that. Refactored draw house into separate functions for each part of the house. Draw door, oops, can't spell door, etc. Okay, what's next? Okay, so next part, at the moment we've used draw house function in order to draw all our houses, but we still had to mess around in our draw function with deciding what the position of those houses is going to be. It's all a bit untidy, and it doesn't separate out nicely the drawing from the sort of the data of the draw. So what we're going to do is, like with our vector, we're going to create a house object in which to keep our house data. So I'm going to first of all just add that into the HTML file so that we can reference it appropriately. And I'm going to want to make a new house object. So let's make a new file. We'll save it in our folder as house.js. Remember that by saving it as a JavaScript file, it will give us our nice pretty print. I'm going to save myself a little bit of typing right now by using the boilerplate object stuff from the vector. I can use Control-H in order to replace all the vector words in there with the house word. Replace all of those, and I'm not going to need getX and setX functions because I am storing those in my vector, but what I do want to do is include a p-position and a p-door color. So if I set position of the house as p-position and I set door color of the house as p-door color, so I'm changing all of these values. It saves me a little bit of typing. But also, on the downside, it does give me more opportunity to mess it up as well and add some errors. But hopefully we won't do that. So I'm going to do Control-H again and replace position with door color. In selection, replace all. There we go. Okay, so those are my getter and setter functions there. So what we're going to need in order to make our house draw itself is we're going to, for starters, we're going to want a draw function for our house. So we just borrow this one to use as a template. We don't need to call it. In our previous example in the canvas.js, we called it draw house because in the context of the canvas, just calling draw wouldn't necessarily mean that you're drawing a house. But in the context of being in a house object, we don't actually need draw house function because it is in the house object. So if we're calling draw on it, it's obvious that we're drawing a house. So that's why we're just going to call it draw. We don't need to give it a door color parameter or a position parameter for that matter because those are going to be held in the object itself. So the house will already know its position, it'll already know its door color, so we don't need to give those as parameters to our house draw function. However, we will need to give it the context that we're going to draw on, because before, context was already known by the canvas, but it's not known by the house. So let's commit what we have at the moment. So I forgot to add it, but I noticed that I can also click on the house there to add it there as well. It's an unversioned file, which means we haven't added it to the repository previously. So I'm committing it now. There's our house, and I also remember actually that I haven't committed that change to the index file either, so I'll do that. Added link to house object in HTML file. Okay, so we've made our new house object, and scrolling down the instructions here, added the draw function. Okay, so next we want our draw function to use all of the work that we've done before. So we're going to start moving these functions into our other draw inside our house. So if I just start moving these across, I'll cut my draw house into there. There's going to be some corrections to make in a minute in here, but for the moment we'll just copy them across. And we'll also cut all of our draw house parts into there. Tidy up our canvas. We'll be returning there in a minute to make that all work. But first, notice the difference between this line here, where we're making a function for our house object, and this line here that we just cut and paste from our canvas file. You notice that there's a difference in the way that the function is declared there. So we're going to want to make these ones look like these ones up here. So probably easiest just to copy and paste from here and overwrite what was there. So the function name, draw wall, function name, draw door, draw left window, draw right window, draw roof. Okay, so now all of these functions actually belong to the house object. We're going to need to call them accordingly. So this won't recognize that there are actually functions there because they don't belong to the house object. Since we're in the house object, we can refer to it using the this command. So that will appropriately call each of the draw wall, draw door functions of the house object accordingly. So if you remember, we don't need to give it position and door color because they already exist inside the file, but we do need to give it the context. So we're going to replace the calling parameters of these functions with context. We just need to make sure that we also update our function definitions as well. And so all of these contexts are going to have to change to p-context. So let us do a block replace context with pcontext, replace all in selection, and also we can replace all of these p positions with our get p position. So let's do a block replace there, p position with this dot get position function, replace all of those, and also our p door color with this dot get door color. So as I said, this is going to be using the internal variables of the house object so that it can essentially draw itself. Okay, so in theory, that is our house object made, so I'm going to commit that. Updated house object to include all the draw functions. I just want to quickly review what we did there. So the important things are that you make sure that you include these functions as house draw functions, include them in the prototype of the house object. We need to pass in the context each time, and all of the p positions and all of the door colors are now properties of the object itself, so we need to call them from the object instead of passing them in as parameters. So now we actually need to use the house object, because you notice that if we refresh this now, nothing's going to happen because we've just taken out all of our code for drawing the house in that way that we did previously. Okay, so next what we're going to want to do is we're going to take all of this for loop code out of the draw function, because what we're going to do is we're going to use it instead in our initialize function in order to construct a bunch of houses. So we're going to add an extra variable called houses, and we're going to initialize that into an empty array. So make a new array object like so. One thing to note is that arrays in JavaScript work more like C# lists than they do C# arrays, in that they are of no fixed length. You can just add things to them indefinitely. So what we're going to be wanting to do is, instead of immediately drawing our house like we were before in the draw function, we're going to be constructing a new house instead. So var house equals new house. Remember from our constructors that we're giving it a position, the house position, and we're giving it a door color. So that's a new house that we've just made. So we could just draw that house in our draw function, but what we want to do is add it to our list of houses. So in order to do that, we use the push function of the array object to add that house that we just made to our list of houses. I made a typo there. So houses array, adding a house to it. So that's going to construct us a whole bunch of house objects, but we haven't drawn them yet. So I'm going to borrow the for loop again, save myself a bit of typing, but instead of drawing a fixed amount now, we want it to draw as many houses as there are in the array. So we can use the length property of the array in order for it to do that. So if we want to do that, var house equals houses, getting the ith element of the houses array, and then we can simply call house.draw. Need to give it a context to draw. And that, in theory, will make our houses come back. No houses, okay. I must have made a mistake somewhere, so let's have a look at the debugger to find out what's going on. Press F12. Okay, so it seemed to be having a problem with finding houses. For some reason, houses is undefined. So why is that? It's made there. We'll make a new array, filling it full of things. Maybe it's a function instead. Okay, we're going to have to dig a little deeper there. I'm not sure why houses is undefined. So, oh no, I see the error there. Okay, let's just undo that. Okay, so the error I've made is that I have defined houses here as a variable. Okay, I've also defined houses using the var command here. But the way that JavaScript works means that that is going to, in this local instance, that is going to override the one that we had up here. So inside this local context, I've made a new array called houses, and I've put everything inside that. But as soon as we come out of the scope of this initialize function, this variable houses gets killed. But this variable houses, which is undefined because we never initialized it, is going to remain the same. So let's just delete that var so it uses the one that already exists. And in theory, that should work. Oh, excellent. Okay, so our houses are back. Good to know. So I'm going to commit what we have there. Which will be, what task? 13. Lab 2, task 13, drawn all the houses as objects in an array of houses. Okay, so that's the end of the lab. As usual, I'm going to leave you with the challenge to complete. Try adding some extra features to your picture as well. Try making a pretty scene. And I'll see you again in Lab 3.